Outlast 2 is a scary game, almost as scary as losing your parents at the supermarket as a kid. But I'm a man now, and if I can go to the supermarket on my own, then I can play Outlast 2. And not just play it, but get the Platinum Trophy. This means getting every story-related and miscellaneous trophy in the game, but more importantly, achieving 2 insanely, see what I did there? Hard trophies, Saint and Messiah, which together require you to beat Outlast 2 on its hardest difficulty insane mode without ever reloading the camera battery. These would be the last 2 trophies I go for on my way to achieving the Platinum, so before we do that, let's look at the journey to achieving every other trophy. To get a feel for the game and all the encounters, I decided to do my first playthrough on Nightmare mode, as this would give me a good idea of just how difficult the game was going to be when I went for my insane run. You start the story taking a romantic helicopter ride with your wife when all of a sudden the pilot decides that staying airborne isn't very fun and we'd actually be better off on foot. You're quickly introduced to the mechanics of the game, and as you make your way down the hill you find a crashed helicopter with your wife missing and the pilot who's definitely seen better days. Soon after making your way into the town you get to meet the locals and encounter your first jump scare.
I'm so fucking scared right now, you shut up!
After making our way through the town, we eventually find our wife who's been getting friendly with the locals, in fact maybe a little bit too friendly.
Whore?
Sadly, we are soon separated again, and after some more running we find ourselves in a flashback at our old school, where it's clear some bad things have been going down, and priests are definitely living up to their reputation. We spend the game making our way through the village looking for Lynn, and continuing to have these horrifying flashbacks of our past. We make friends along the way, but sadly these friendships are short-lived.
Oh, he did!
We're introduced to the village creeps, including a 7-foot-tall murdering grandma, a hunchback and a midget with a bow and arrow, a young woman called Val who continues the Outlast trend of licking people's faces, and a demon who is a representation of the evil priest from school. Eventually, after much adventure, we find Lynn again, who is pregnant with what is apparently the Antichrist, whose birth will trigger the end of days.
Well, that's just fucking great!
After escaping Grandma, Lynn gives birth to a baby that Jacob can see but she says is not there. Things don't end too well for Lynn, and as Jacob carries the baby through the town, the prophecy seemingly comes true. Just like Outlast 1, this game is terrifying on a first playthrough, but playing through on Nightmare mode gave me a great idea of what paths enemies take, and therefore what paths I need to take to avoid them. I was by no means ready to tackle Insane mode yet, but we were definitely on our way. Our first playthrough on Nightmare mode gave us the Prophet, Asahel, and Preacher trophies, which included beating the game on Nightmare mode in under 4 hours and without ever hiding in a barrel or closet. We collected every document in the game and logged every recording in the game to give us the Ordination and the Apostle Paul trophies. Finally, we got all the silly miscellaneous trophies out the way, which included crawling for 500 meters, sliding in blood, using the microphone on the camera for 20 minutes, spending 10 minutes underwater, and bandaging ourselves 10 times in a single playthrough. And so, with every other trophy in the game complete, there are only 2 trophies left before getting the Platinum. Outlast 2's Saint trophy requires you to beat the game on its insane difficulty. This is a permadeath difficulty, which means if you die, you start from the very beginning of the game. Now, for some reason, Red Barrel Studios decided this wasn't a painful enough trophy as it is, and so to make things even worse, they added in the Messiah trophy, which requires you to beat Outlast 2's insane mode without ever reloading the camera battery. And let me tell you, Outlast 2 is a dark game, like really dark. If Stevie Wonder was ever a lead developer on a video game, it would look a lot like Outlast 2. The game gets especially dark towards the end when you get to the mines, and so if you've used all your camera battery before the mine encounters, you can pretty much kiss your Messiah run goodbye. Now, to give me the best possible chance of beating this mode first time, I went about practicing the most annoying encounters of the game over and over until I felt pretty confident that when the real time came around, I'd be ready. In my opinion, there are 5 or 6 main encounters in Outlast 2 that are the most painful to deal with. The first, believe it or not, is not an enemy encounter, it's this. This jump absolutely sucks and caused me more grief than I care to admit, and so I practiced it about 10 times to make sure I had it down, and I was definitely not going to fail when it came to the insane run. The second is the martyr cart pushing section, which everyone has a hard time with. However, this turned out to be pretty easy after I found this strategy, in where you bait martyr into chasing you, wait for her to run off, and then sprint into the fence ahead of you, which just causes her to disappear forever. Third is basically the entire chapter of Chapter 2 with Nick and Laird, with the most annoying part by far being this section where you need to grab a rope. This is arguably the most inconsistent section of the game, in where sometimes there won't be any enemies in your way and in others there will. Researching this section, I couldn't find anyone with a complete 100% foolproof strategy for this section, but I think my way worked pretty well in the end. The library is another giant pain, not so much for the enemies, but more because of how insanely dark it is. I found a map on Reddit which helps you understand where to go, but it's still a horrible section because you don't want to waste your camera battery. Last up is this section in the mines where 2 heretics are following you around. This was more of a waiting game in the end rather than anything else, but I had to practice because dying this far into the game on insane mode would probably cause me to have a breakdown. I probably went through each of these encounters 5 or 6 times, and by the time I was done I felt ready enough to give my Messiah run its first try. My first Messiah run was going really well. I was going fast, conserving camera battery and avoiding enemies by following Patches O'Houlihan's advice in Dodgeball.
Dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge.
After making our way through the beginning section, we were heading for our first big encounter, and at this point I was really starting to feel like this was possible, and maybe we're going to be able to do this for the first time.
Did that go the way you thought it was going to go? Nope.
With the chances of a first perfect run ruined, it was time to start our second run. One of the most painful things about Outlast 2 is the inability to skip any of the cutscenes, and let me tell you, the first half is full of them. You'll only be running for about 5 minutes or so before being captured or hiding somewhere, only to be forced to watch another 5 to 10 minute long cutscene. This is just extra motivation to make sure you do everything you can to not die. I moved through the game quickly and eventually made it back to where I died the first time. With the jump cleared, I was able to move through the town successfully, making my way through every dangerous encounter in Chapter 1, including the cart push, until reaching this town of sick people. Now, I knew that there was an enemy that comes down the hill and tries to stab you, which I was prepared for. However, what I wasn't prepared for was this.
Did that go the way you thought it was going to go? Nope.
I had never died that way once in any of my playthroughs and was probably left speechless for about a good 10 minutes. After some quick research, I discovered that all I had to do to survive that encounter was to have ticked a box in my settings to always make sure I win QuickTime events, which for some reason wasn't already ticked. And so with my new knowledge of how to handle that encounter in my head, it was time for our third run. Things were going well. We made it through Chapter 1, and we shoved off the guy who killed us the last time. We made it to Chapter 2 and we were introduced to the main enemy of that chapter, Nick and Laird. Your first main encounter with Nick and Laird involves them firing arrows at you, which you need to avoid. The tactic here is to go behind a tree and bait them into firing arrows at you until they circle round the tree, at which point it's time to run. I practiced this encounter at least 7 times and was able to get away scot-free every single time. And so on insane mode, I was ready to do the exact same thing again, but this happened.
Did that go the way you thought it was going to go? Nope.
Another thing that had never happened to me before, I get grabbed through the tree and get headshotted by the little midget. At this point I was feeling really hard done by. I was dying in ways that had never happened before, and so if I was going to carry on, I needed some motivational content to help me. And so, just like he helped me get through Little Nightmares Part 1, I went back to Joe Biden for advice again.
So I learned about roaches, I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
After hearing Joe's words, I felt confident enough to give my Messiah run a 4th try. We cleared Chapter 1, Chapter 2, and Chapter 3 with ease. Eventually we made it to the library. Now, my plan here was to use the map I showed you and use my night vision as little as possible. This completely went out the window. I panicked and I didn't want to use the night vision at all, and so instead I attempted to make my way through the library in complete darkness and got stuck for a good 20 minutes. Eventually I was able to make it to the camera battery, get around the demon, and clear the next chapter. By this point in the game, my palms were so sweaty I thought the controller was going to slip out of my hand. I took my time in avoiding the heretics until I felt like it was safe to make a run for it. I avoided Val in the switch section and was coming so close to getting out and finding Lynn, and there was only one thing that could ruin everything now. My battery was flashing red for so long and I was petrified that I was going to get lost or stuck in a chase section at the very end and that would be it. But thank God the battery held on right until I was able to make it out of the mines. I found Lynn, escaped the final chase section with Marta, and like that, the last dangerous encounter in the game was done. As the game came to its conclusion, I waited with bated breath to make sure that I'd done everything right and that these trophies were actually going to pop.
Send me quietly to sleep. Watchful Savior, wash away all I've been wrong today. Help me every day to be gentle, gentle, more like thee.
I'd done it, and I had achieved my hardest and rarest platinum trophy to date. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.